Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, how are you?
Anthony.
I love the hat. I love it.
Thank, thank you. Thank you.
got
How
the
are
got the
you?
Carmen San Diego vibe going.
Huh?
Got the Carmen San Diego vibe going.
What you know about that?
How old do you think I am? You think I'm like 20 years old?
I
I know
mean,
about
you might.
Carmen San Diego.
You know what they say. You know what they say about black. You know what they say. And I'm greeting you like we know each other.
I know.
Well, we are family in tech, right?
That's right. That's right.
Um, Thank you everyone for joining. We have an exciting chat tonight. It's going to just flow. My name is Ursula. Full name is Ursula Spencer. I am the founder of Dope Nerds. Dope Nerds is a tech education company, and our mission is to train aspiring underrepresented techies, ages 18 to 24, in high growth, high paying skills so that we can establish a tech ecosystem and pipeline so that they can foster, and nurture some awesome careers in tech. I've been a part of the group, let's see, maybe a year. I think everybody just like flushed and joined a bunch of groups like during lockdown. We were like officially lockdown.
Yep.
And I believe Fred Williams added me to the group, and it's been fantastic. And so Miss Nichols asked that I host tonight's interview. And so I'm like super excited to introduce you all to Anthony Culver. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
Yep. Yep.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank
Who
you.
is a senior software engineer at Netflix. And so, Anthony, we are going to jump right in. Tell us a little bit about who you are and tell us some about some of your journey into tech. And don't touch on the Netflix stuff just yet because we
Okay.
that's like the hook, right? But yeah, tell us to give us a little story about yourself.
Cool. Cool. So, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Good. Okay. So my name is Anthony. I am currently a senior software engineer at Netflix. I've been there a little bit over a year. So just kind of starting out, I went to college for computer science. Even that was an interesting journey. I started at the University of Illinois. I'm from Chicago originally, so it was close to home, good school, cheap in-state tuition, and I was typical teenager. I put much thought into college. It was like I got in and I can just go do this. So this is where I'm going. Um, I hated it. I only stayed there for 2 years, and then I
Okay.
transferred to Clark Atlanta University. So very very different experience going to college in the city in a city like Atlanta, but also at an HBCU. It's a very very different experience.
Nice.
Absolutely loved it. Um, and then I finished there and actually did not work as a software engineer for a while.
Okay.
So I had a few different, I was working in IT organizations, but not as an engineer. So I wasn't like writing code. Like my first job out of college was at Lowe's on a release management team. And a lot of that was just me and like two old dudes writing a bunch of shell scripts to like push code out to distribution centers and stores and stuff, which was cool because I learned a lot about Linux and working from. I'm very very comfortable working from the command line. I will write a shell script to automate anything in like 5 minutes.
Yes.
So it was helpful, right? But I was getting bored, so I just kind of bounced around a lot. I ended up working as like a data analyst at a utility company out in Charlotte, and it was okay, but I was there as a contractor. And then I got married, and my wife wasn't working at the time, and I needed benefits. And they were like, "Well, we can't hire you full time." So I was like, "All right, I gotta go." So I ended up at Bank of America on a team doing supported a couple of Java apps, and my manager at the time, he was incredible, and kind of worked out this agreement that I would kind of start out doing support for the team, which was great for them because they never had anybody with a technical background. They could actually
Ah,
kind of troubleshoot stuff ahead of time. But eventually I moved into a development role. Long story short, a bunch of people left, my manager left, and then they tried to put me on a team of business analysts. And I was just like, nah, that's not what I
he
came
was
here
like, "That's
for.
not my ministry."
that is that is not why I'm here. So I started looking, and I just randomly took a job in Kansas City with a healthcare IT company called Cerner. Never heard of the company before. It was a huge company. They did a lot of great work, but the manager, she managed a enterprise BI team. And so I just got a really good vibe from her. I didn't know what a data warehouse was. I didn't know about anything they were doing. I was just like, let's go. I'm ready to do something different. So that was actually the first time I had a job title of software engineer. So this
Ah.
was 4 or 5 years
Yeah,
into
give us
my
some
career.
years, give us some years around so that our fellow techies have an idea of, like how many years you were in sort of like each role and how you kind of like matriculated, so to speak, your way
Yeah.
up.
So my first couple roles, I was only there for about a year and a half.
Okay.
The Bank of America, I was there for just about 2 years, almost 2 years. And in this next role, I was working on enterprise BI team. So we were doing, this is basically data engineering before people started using the term data engineer. But this was more like traditional data warehousing. So we were doing data modeling. We were doing all the data integration projects across a 16,000 person company. We were doing all the reporting and kind of working with users on that stuff. So I loved it. And I stayed there for about 5 years on
Nice.
that team.
Okay.
Um, and that's what I just kind of kept doing that for the most part. So my next job after that, my wife and I, we started, we had kids when we were out there in Kansas City, but we had 2 kids in 2 years, and like all our family was just split between the coasts, and it was a lot traveling for weddings and birthdays, and funerals and whatever, right? And traveling with kids was a lot, so we wanted to be closer to family. So came back out to Atlanta, and I was consulting for almost 3 years. I did that. And that's when I got into, I was still data engineer, but I was doing more like big data work. So I got a lot of experience working in like Hadoop, the Hadoop ecosystem. I got a lot of experience with, some different types of data stores, HBase and a couple of other things. I started doing a little bit of cloud work and got really, really into GCP, which I
Okay.
still love. Way more than AWS. I will go to GCP for everything first.
It's always a love hate. There's always a love
It,
hate between the different disciplines.
yeah, I think it really just comes down to what you use the most first. But that's kind of where I started. So yeah, I did consulting for about 3 years, and then I went to Mailchimp, and this was 2018. That's when I started there. So I was at Mailchimp a little over 2 years.
So let me ask, and then I feel like the Netflix gig is coming.
It's
So
coming.
yes. So your career, your career spans how many years in total in all of your roles, including contracting?
Oh man,
Roughly.
15 years.
Okay, I was about to
15
say
years. Yeah.
20. Okay.
Nah, not quite there yet, but
Okay.
15
All right.
years.
15. All right. So once you had the gig in 2018, how did you arrive? So at this point, is your official title senior software engineer? Like even though you were at a different organization, or did you
Yeah.
transition into that role once you got to Netflix?
So it was when I was at the job in Kansas City, I got hired as a software engineer. About a year and a half or so into that, I got promoted to senior. And then I was next up in line for a promotion to architect, and then I left. So job titles in the consulting world are weird. They don't really
Yes.
have a whole lot to do with like levels and stuff in the sense that they do in the tech industry.
Yes.
So I started as a senior consultant there, and then I got promoted. My job title was manager, which was weird because I wasn't really a manager. It's that's a whole thing. But
Yes.
um,
I come from a consulting.
okay, so
Yeah, so
you
I
know.
know how it, I know. So it's kind of, and let me get your opinion. You touched on something really interesting because, and this is, I've seen this as a topic in the group. And to your point about how sometimes it could be a little weird, like having these titles as contractors, it's my opinion that, my professional opinion, that you could leverage that.
Oh
That's how you can get to the bags, bigger bags, etc.
oh yeah,
Right?
that
Do you
yeah
so
that matters.
do
That
you
definitely
agree with
matters.
that? Like
Hmm.
leveraging, even though the industry likes to play with these titles, but as long
Hmm.
as you have the results, right? A result driven resume to prove that,
Hmm.
is it your thought, in your opinion, that you can leverage those contractor titles in order to kind of be a stepping stone into a bigger bag and or role?
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of things to that, right? Like, so excuse me, looking at that specifically, having that title of manager, if I decided I want to go into an engineering manager role, I can leverage that and say I have experience as a manager, right? And
Yes.
a lot of it is just playing the game and trying to get
Yes.
in front of somebody, right? Like, it's not so like recruiters aren't reading your resume. I know this because they ask me about jobs that have nothing to do with my skill set,
Right.
but like they're not looking at it. But it's you want them to hit on those keywords and things like that just
Yes.
to give you the opportunity to speak to somebody. And so I think that matters, but also it matters in terms of like salary, because if you are going, let's say, to a place like Netflix, right, where there's only one level, right,
Mm,
and your comp varies based on just things that are very specific to you, right?
yes.
Um, if you come in and say like I've got all this experience and my job title has been senior software engineer versus like I'm coming from a place where I was a principal engineer,
Ah,
that might make a difference to say, okay, this
that
person
might
like,
make like a 20K difference.
yeah, and that happens in some places, or you go somewhere where the leveling system is completely different, right? You go somewhere like Microsoft where your level is like you're a level 72 or whatever that means, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily map one to one, and you don't necessarily know what that mapping is. So
Yes.
having that job title that can play a role in how much money you're offered in terms of your next role, but also the types of roles that people reach out to you for. You look at a lot of early stage startups, they want very senior people. So they're going and they're looking for the staff engineers, the principal engineers. And so, those people will probably look for you if you have that title. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter what you're doing so much because that will vary a lot between companies. Like a staff engineer at company A is not doing the same thing as a staff engineer at company B.
Mm,
But that job title matters just in terms of appearances and things that happen external.
okay. That's really, really good. I wanted to make a note to our viewers. Listen, pop in your questions. Um, should you have any questions or commentary that you want us to kind of touch on, make sure you pop them in the comments, and we'll either get to them as Anthony and I are chatting, or we'll do it toward the end. Um, and so when you got to, so around what year did you get to Netflix? And I want to know, along your journey, did you, at what point, two questions. Did you have mentors along your journey? Did you even think, like, along your tech career journey, that you even needed a mentor? And if yeah, right? Because a lot of us going in don't even, especially, and I want to say for our community especially, like, we've heard of what guidance counselors. I mean, I'm from
Mhm.
Brooklyn, so they were guidance counselors, right? But then
Yeah,
after high school, it was just like, all right, I'm gonna just rock out, right? Like, I'm gonna just make it
right.
happen. So I would love, we would love to hear, did you did you even think about getting a mentor as you navigated these different, because you navigated quite a bit of waters, right, before even getting to Netflix? And then when you, at what point did you realize, a mentor would be good? And did you and do you have one over at Netflix?
Yeah. So I did, but probably not soon enough.
Mm,
So my first job, I kind of reached out to somebody that was in the organization. He was a manager for a team that I was actually kind of interested in going to work for. And I've been there for like 7 or 8 months, and I was like, I'm bored. I need to do something else. And I was talking to him, and he gave me one of the best pieces of advice for my career. He said, give yourself 2 years. He said,
mm,
at 2 years is kind of like that inflection point where you need to look at it and see, are you still growing? Are you still learning? And if you're not, it's time to do something different. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to leave the company. It doesn't even necessarily mean you have to leave your team, but you should be doing something else that's challenging you and pushing you to grow. And I was like, you're right. Can I come work for you? He's like, I don't have any roles on my team. So
I love
I ended
that.
up
I
leaving the
love that.
company.
You just jumped right in. Like, you gave a lesson just now that I'm not sure if others peeped. And that is, you just got to go for it. You just,
Closed
especially
mouth don't get fed.
that part. And it's that window of opportunity, right? Like, I was just telling someone earlier today, there's a difference between taking advantage of an opportunity and being an opportunist.
Mhm.
And so I love the fact that you saw this window, was like, man, this manager is, dropping some jewels. How about I work for you? So I love that you
Yeah.
went for it.
And it's funny because I did that, but I didn't realize that's what I was doing at the time.
Ah,
That was more out of desperation than anything at that point.
than being strategic, you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. And I think like after that, I didn't really have another mentor probably until um I would say probably when I got to MailChimp a few years ago. Um,
Mm,
and I think that made a huge difference because I I did a lot in my career, but it was just kind of me stumbling into new things. There was no real thought, there was no real focus, and it wasn't so much that I didn't think that I needed to. It was just I didn't know what to focus on, and I
ah,
think that's the value of mentorship is you know, mentorship is not about telling somebody what to do. It's not like necessarily giving advice in the traditional sense, right? It's not like, I want to get a career in tech. Okay, here's what you do. Here's this checklist. Do X, Y, and Z. I can't tell you what to do because I'm not you. I don't have the same experiences you have. I don't have the same preferences and goals and desires that you have. So it's more like, tell me what you want to do. If you're not sure, let's talk about how we can get you to a point where you can figure that out. But then once you do that, like, here are some things to consider as you go along that
ah,
journey, right? I can tell you what happened to me when I got to that point, and I can tell you, just sharing my experience, this is what happened to me when I got to this point and I wanted to do X, Y, and Z. I made this plan and I did this. This worked out well. This did not work out well. And here's what happened as a result. Now it's up to you to do what you want with that information. But
yes,
now you have some perspective, right? You have
yes,
some perspective from somebody that's been there. And that I think is the key to mentorship is having somebody to point you in the right direction and say, are you thinking about these things? Because these things will come up and be important as you go along this journey. And so that's what I didn't have. And I was just fumbling around trying to like not be bored and make more money. And like I wasn't really focused. But I was just really fortunate to be in some really good positions and to work with some really amazing people. And actually I've had some incredible managers in my career, which is
which
not
in a
the
way is
case for everybody.
which in a way is mentorship without calling it that, right? Sometimes
Yeah.
sometimes we have to recognize the jewels that are being dropped, right? We have to be
Hmm.
able to identify them. Something that you mentioned that I want to touch on a couple of things. I just think, and this is just my blanket opinion, is I'm a woman of a certain age, so I'm probably like the auntie of this group. Um, but But something that I noticed just amongst us as techies and tech heads is that a good majority of us are probably introverts, right? So we're already feeling as though, you know what, I don't know about approaching anybody about mentorship. Like, I don't even like people like that, right? Right? Or or just this innate kind of like fear, right? Of
Mhm.
rejection, or just being afraid to kind of take that step. Extrovert probably got this in the bag, right? Where they're just step up to
Mhm.
someone, right? So
Yep.
what advice can you give to our audience in regards to kind of taking that leap and identifying someone, because you don't want to be the smartest one in the room.
Mhm.
So what would be your recommendation in identifying someone who can be a mentor to them?
I think first off is just kind of being self-aware and
Mm,
knowing, having a good idea of what you want. Like, and it doesn't have to be like, here's my 10-year plan and I want to be a CTO of whatever company, right? Like, you don't have to go that far. It could just be, I want to get promoted next year,
I
right?
love
It,
it.
like that's your goal, right? And you start there. You look for somebody that is in a similar situation as you, and somebody that has done what you're trying to do, right? Like, you've seen this person, and not necessarily like, I'm trying to get to senior, I'm just gonna go find a random senior engineer and ask them. Like, that's not a bad thing to do. But if you can find somebody at the place where you're trying to get promoted that's done it and gone through that process there, just ask. It is very rare that, in my experience, that somebody's going to straight up tell you no.
Agreed.
um, and a lot of people, I think that are really good mentors, and people that really care and are invested, they are just, they are more than happy to do that. And they are just, but they're also really busy. And so they're not going out looking for people like, hey, do you need a mentor? Do you need a
Right.
mentor? It's just like, but if you go to them, they will stop everything, and they will talk to you, they will help you with whatever you want. um, and a lot of people are just, they're intimidated to ask, because, part of, like you said, a lot of us are introverted. In some cases, especially if you're younger and earlier in your career, it can be very intimidating to just walk up to somebody who is more experienced, or somebody that you respect, and just start a conversation with them. Part of it is just being comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yes.
And if you're gonna work in this industry, you got to do that anyway. Especially
Yes.
us as Black folks, we are almost always in uncomfortable situations. So
Exactly. Yeah.
you got to get used to it, and just ask. Like, that is really all you have to do, is just ask.
I really love that. A a piece a piece that I think we often miss is that, to your point about kind of like running up to somebody and being like, "Yeah, I think you're awesome. Can you be my mentor?" I think it's important as a mentee, and let me know if you agree or not, that it's important for a mentee to bring something to the table as well.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
and what I and I think what happens, and why maybe more of us you know don't seek or may not seek mentorship, is because we don't think we have anything to offer, but you do. So I think that
Mhm.
also just circles back to your self-awareness statement about how important it is to just kind of like also be confident, right, in your skill set, and not just the techie side. A lot of mentorship has to do with soft skills.
Yeah,
Would you agree with
yeah.
that?
Oh yeah. And that's something that I tell people all the time. It's I think we spend a lot of time focusing on the technical skills, and a lot of that, it's just the nature of the industry, right? Because, like, if you want to get a job, we all know what the interview process is like, and it's a whole lot of just leak code and data structures and algorithms and just code and system design and like all this stuff, right? And it's such a heavy focus on that.
Hmm.
But the engineers that really do well and succeed are the ones that can do the non-technical things very well.
Yes.
If you're good at coaching and teaching, if you can talk to people and you can communicate technical concepts very clearly to people without a technical understanding.
Yeah.
If you know how to presentations, putting together a presentation and knowing how to put that together, the visuals for the specific audience. Like these are things that people don't understand. I watched the presentation the other day and it was just a wall of text on every slide. And I'm just like, I see why you did this, but that's not what that's not a good visual to have in a presentation that you're
Well, wait, Anthony, I got one better for you. When it's that kind of presentation and then the presenter is reading that joint word for word.
Yes.
If you're out there and you're doing that, please stop. It is not getting through to anyone, and everyone wants off that call immediately. All right, this is awesome. And by the way, to our audience, we will definitely get to your questions probably like within the 10 minutes time frame, just so we get everyone's questions. So if you have a question or comment or anything, be sure to drop them in the comment section. So Anthony, let's jump into, listen, Netflix is obviously up there with like the Googles and the Apples, right? Like if we were talking about like top, well, I think Meta was, but then like they've lost like what 25% of their market share. So people might be like, let's put them on pause for a moment. But the top tier in wanting to be in tech and at a certain company, Google's of the world, Apple, right? Meta, Netflix is up there, right? So please share with us what you can, right, about Netflix culture, what it's like being there. And hopefully this isn't too touchy, but what it's like being there as a senior software engineer, but as a person of color in a senior role.
Yeah, so it's I like people ask me about this all the time, and it's weird because like I remember when I was interviewing and I was like freaking out the whole time, and I was just like, oh my god, what am I gonna do? I don't know, like I didn't get any feedback. I couldn't tell if they liked it or not, and blah blah blah. And I have a couple of friends that worked there that I knew before, and I was just like harassing them every day, like, so what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to expect? I don't know, like, how am I supposed to prepare for this? And just like going nuts, right? It is a surprisingly regular place to work. Like
regular?
You have all these like preconceived notions about like what it's going to be like in Netflix, and you hear all these stories, like the good and the bad, and you know, and you expect to get there, and it's just like this magical engineering organization.
Like all of a sudden, like Golden Gates open.
And then like you, even in the interview process, it's like everybody's so down to earth and just friendly. And it's a very unique interview experience. It's very long, but it's not a bad process.
I kind of feel like we're all used to long. So what's your version of long? Because the general consensus that I've seen is, at least anywhere between 3 to 7 ridiculous interviews. So is it that kind of long?
It's generally like 6 to 8 interviews.
Dang.
It depends. It's when I say it's unique, like every team can come up with their own interview process. That's changing a little bit, but it's still completely up to that team. And so, just for an example, like I had 9 interviews.
Not
did
9.
A take-home project and 9 interviews.
9?
It was supposed to be 8. Yeah, it was supposed to be 8. My org was going under a different director. They was like, we want you to talk to this director now too. And
no.
Yeah. So I was really just exhausted, and it was a long process.
I bet.
It wasn't bad. And I had a couple extra interviews because my team, like we do a lot of back-end service development, but we also do some like operational reporting and data engineering stuff. So like I had interviews for both of those things.
Wow.
But normally it's just like one thing that we want you to focus on. So But again, it wasn't a bad process. There
It
was
was
no
just
just
long.
code. It was just, yeah. And everything you do from a technical standpoint is generally centered around stuff that that team does and stuff that you would do in that role. So like a good example is the system design interview I did was a high level design exercise for one of the services my team owns. So it
Got
was
it.
like, okay, like this is cool because like now I see what y'all do on a regular basis. It gives me some insight into what I'd be doing if I worked there.
Okay.
But the culture overall, I mean, if you've read the culture memo, it everything that's in there happens. But there's nuance to it, right? It's like, well, I heard about the keeper test. Everybody gets fired all the time. It's like
Oh,
people get let
about the
go.
high
Yeah,
turnover.
yeah. And it's turnover is not really high, but people do get let go
Mm.
relatively often, like a lot more than I've seen any other place. But it's not just like random and arbitrary. It's also not usually ICs. From what I've seen, it's a lot of the leadership that kind of goes through that.
I'm glad you mentioned that because what I have found is that when it gets, budget time, they usually try to cut out the middle layer, right? They realize
Mhm,
that it's way too many management layers between, the what I like to call not worker bees, but in the trenches, right? Tech
mhm,
and to the decision maker. So by the time we've created a solution, right, be that through
mhm,
code or through system building systems, it's got to go through all of these iterations before it makes a final decision. And then you're like,
mhm,
and that's budget too, right? You're extending all of these projects, et cetera, et cetera. So I find that interesting. Oh, look. So you talked about culture and all of these comments and questions started popping up. So if you don't mind, Anthony, because I want to because you've touched on some of these, I want to
mhm,
address them. So let's see. The first question touches on growth and development. So I'll read it. I've been programming professionally since 2005, but never had a mentor as far as tech. And they really think it doesn't have a person's name, so I apologize. And so they think that it's really affected sort of like their growth level and development.
mhm,
So they want to know, and this particular, and we talked about being an introvert, right? So this person hasn't really stepped outside of their comfort zone. So they want to know, like, how did you find one? Well, you touched on that, but then how would you go about, and you might have spoken on this too, but maybe add some more. How would you go about finding one? So when you kind of have like this fear of stepping outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah, I think excuse me. Part of it is kind of finding ways that you can practice interacting with people one on one in an environment that's more comfortable for you. Um, so if you're more comfortable in just one on one situations and you don't like interacting with people when they are if you're in a group setting, right? Um, just send somebody an email, somebody on your team that you may not even necessarily be looking for them to be your mentor, but just somebody that you have a good relationship with, and ask them for if you can just have a conversation with them and just ask them about their career,
I
right?
love
Just
that.
how you got to this point. It's somebody you know, it's somebody you're comfortable with, but it gets you kind of in this habit of interacting with people one on one and asking questions to
And
somebody that may
initiate.
be more senior to you. Yeah, and initiating that conversation.
Yeah,
Another
that's,
thing I
that's a
do
good one.
is, yeah, I have regular one-on-ones with everybody on my team. Usually
Nice.
it's like once a month or so, but some of that is just, it's not like we don't get together and talk about like projects we're working on. It's just like, how are you? How are your kids? Like,
Like, I
that
don't
just
know,
that
be
kind
a
of stuff.
human.
Yeah, just getting to know people because
Yeah.
one, it I found like a lot of stuff just in terms of like networking and interacting with people is being comfortable with small talk
Yes.
and understanding how to keep a conversation going, but also understanding how to listen and like actually have somebody feel comfortable talking to you. And so that helps as well. Just having those regular conversations, you get more comfortable just having one-on-one interaction with people. then you go find somebody that you want to be your mentor. And you just ask, like I said, you
Just
just
ask.
ask,
Yeah,
right? That's all you got to do is just ask.
I love that.
Um,
I
but
love that.
also it doesn't have to be a formal thing, and I think that's something else that people lose sight of. I have mentors that have no idea they're my mentors. We just have a good relationship. I respect them and I ask them questions.
And so,
And
so you have someone that you feel is like a confidant or a sounding board, just
yeah,
a general. Yeah, that's awesome. That's
yeah, and
awesome.
it doesn't have to be a formal thing. I mean, I have mentees that we just meet every
You just
couple of
pick it.
weeks, and sometimes we just talk. Right? We
Yeah.
just we just talk every now and then. Work stuff will come up. Sometimes it won't. I have another mentee. She's just really just on point with everything. She came to me and asked if I would be her mentor. I said sure. And then like a week later, she sent me a Google Doc like, here's a list of my goals and here's what I
That's
want to
how you do
accomplish.
it.
Here's how I want to do it.
Yes.
Can I get some feedback on this?
Yes.
And so like it's what works for you. And I
Yes.
think again, kind of going back to that self-awareness point, you have to first spend some time and really reflect on what it is that you want to do. And I know it's not always easy to do that. I have trouble with that myself sometimes. And if that's the case, then go seek out a mentor to help you kind of start identifying that and help you talk through um, how to define goals and really get down to what it is that you want to do and what you're passionate about.
I love that. That was fantastic. We have Steve who's asking, what are your thoughts on applying for jobs that lists qualifications or experiences that you may not have at the time that you're applying? That's a great question, Steve. Thank you.
Always apply for it. Always.
That part,
Always.
Anthony, say it
I
again. Say it again.
every single time, if there's a job that looks interesting and it's something that you want to do, and the important thing is that the things that are listed that you haven't done, if you're one interested in learning them and two you're comfortable with the ability to learn them, then go for it. Like if I went back and looked at job descriptions for every job I've had, I have never been qualified for any of them.
That is fantastic.
Maybe one, but like a good example, when I went to MailChimp, I was on the team that was running everything in Kubernetes. I had never used Kubernetes. They were using a bunch of Kafka. I had never used Kafka. They were using Elasticsearch and Prometheus and building gRPC services. I had never done any of this stuff.
And still went for
I
it.
and I still went for it. I actually applied for that job on accident, so that's a little bit of a different. So that's a different story, but
That is awesome. I got a quick.
but I
I got a.
went and went after. So
Oh, I'm sorry, Anthony.
but,
Finish your
no, go
thought.
ahead, go ahead, go ahead. I'm done.
I got to finish. I got a funny one, kind of in line with what you're talking about, where they had all of these, and I'm on the system administrative side, right? So we work really closely with developers. Well, when I was in corporate, right? And the quick funny story is similar to what you're saying. They had like these lists. They literally showed me a whiteboard. This is during an interview of like this system. You know what I said? I said, I have absolutely no idea what you all are talking about. I said that in the interview, but that's because I was confident in what I already, not only in the skills that I already had, but I
Mhm.
knew what I could bring to the table. I knew that one of my talents was that you could put any tech in front of me and I would learn it and master it within a short period of time. So to your point earlier about making sure that you showcase those other skills outside of just, being a tech head, that can get you, and that got me in the door. I beat out 11 candidates and I wasn't, who all had certifications, they had all of these degrees, but it was
Yep.
all of this other experience and hands-on that I had that trumped what they were going for. So I love that you're like,
Oh yeah.
listen, just go for it.
Yeah, and that's you touched on a couple things. One, I think we all know interviewing is a skill, and it's a
It
thing
come
that
on,
you
but
have
it's
to.
it also sucks.
It does. It
It
does.
sucks.
And you have to practice it, and that's one of the things that I think is a great signal to see in an interview is somebody admitting like I don't know this thing, but actually taking that and pivoting and showcasing what you do know, right?
Yeah.
Like no, I don't understand. Like I've never used Kafka before, but like I've worked with like Spark streaming. Like I've done that a lot. And here's like if it's a streaming technology, right? And so that's how you're using it. Let me tell you about what I have done that's
Yes.
relevant and related to that, right? And
Yes.
so you always have to like, it sounds weird, like kind of control the narrative of the interview.
Yes.
Um, and but also don't just start throwing out words that you think they want to hear,
Right.
because they're going to start asking you about that.
That's true.
So
We have some other ones. Okay, so this is outside of my. I don't know if this is this a real thing? Fang? That's a real thing? FAANG?
yeah,
Okay.
Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google. It's
Ah, okay. Listen, I've been in the industry. See, I'm embarrassed. I've been in the industry over 26 years. I did not
it,
know that's what that acronym was. Okay.
it was initially an acronym talking about companies with the best performing stock. And it's just
Oh.
like snowballed into this thing in the tech industry where it's like these are the top companies that everybody's talking about all the time. Like
Okay, so
it's
similar
weird.
to what I was saying, but I didn't put the acronym. Oh, okay. Thank you,
Yeah.
Facebook user. Well, their question was, were you at a Fang before going to Netflix?
I was not. This is really my first endeavor into the tech industry. Technically, MailChimp was in the tech industry, but like
Yeah,
companies headquartered in Atlanta, and even within the tech industry, it's such a unique
right.
place. Like
They're
it
super
doesn't really
nichey,
count.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is like my first experience at a big tech company, which has been interesting. But it was never I never really had a goal to work at one of the bigger companies. One, I never thought it was going to be possible because I'm not moving to California. That's not happening.
Mhm.
But
And you're
also,
not of a certain shade.
and that part. But um, I never. A lot of people like that's the focus, right? And for me, it was I had other goals, but that wasn't one of them. And so, it's been a fun experience. It's very interesting because people treat you differently, um,
Mm.
which is it's also been interesting. There's good and bad there, but yeah, I was not at a FANG company before this.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Oh, this is a really good one. I don't want to pronounce your first name wrong. Ladson. So I'll just say your last name because I hate when people jack up my name. And the question is, how did you prepare for your big tech interview? That's a great question.
Yes. So the tech interviews is really kind of like two big things that people focus on, right? There's the dreaded leak code, data structures, algorithm stuff, right? So I know a lot of people use leak code. I don't really like leak code, like the website leak code. Algo Expert, I think, is a really good website to kind of get some practice on those types of problems. I did not use either of those. I actually use Interview Cake, and I love Interview Cake. And I'll tell you why. It's a little bit more expensive, but if you don't get a job, they will give you your money back. But also the problems that they go through, they're categorized very well, and it's very approachable, um, especially for people that don't have a background in computer science. Because when you start talking about data structures and algorithms and big O notation and like time and space complexity analysis and all this stuff, it's very academic, and the people that are very knowledgeable on those topics have spent all of their lives in academia, and they talk like that and they present information like that, and it is not very easily consumable. um, but I think Interview Cake does a really great job of saying, okay, here's a section on arrays, and before you get into writing code, let's go talk about what they are and how they work at a hardware level,
Right.
and like all the different reasons why you should use them, like why sorting them is more efficient than not sorting them and all this other stuff, right? Then when you get into the practice problems, it presents the problem and says, do you have an answer for this? And you have a little window to like write code and stuff. And if you think you've gotten a solution, you click it, and if it's right, cool. If it's not, you don't have to do that. You can just say, no, I'm not ready. And they give you a little bit more context and give you a little bit more of a hint and say, like, well, maybe you should think about these things. And here's what you have to do to kind of start analyzing this problem. And you keep doing that until you get all the way to the end of the problem. And so I feel like you learn more there. But what I will say is Interview Cake does not have as much content in terms of just practice as like Elite Code or an Algo Expert or something like that. So I think a combination of those, like one or two of those services is good for that. Then you have like the system design problems, which I think is really interesting because a lot of that you really only understand from doing it. You only really have that context if you've had work and projects to actually do that in the real world. So that, I think that is where it puts like junior engineers and people just starting out and looking for their first role. It puts them at a little bit of a disadvantage if that's a focus of the interview. And that's one of those things you can study and you can learn the concepts, but you have to actually do mock interviews and practice. So I did have a couple people that helped me out with that and just doing practice mock interviews for that kind of stuff. But I think that's really the only way to get better and prepare for those, because it's not just understanding the concepts, it's working with another person and talking through them and, talking through the problems and having somebody interrupt you and just like throw just blow your whole thing up and just be like, well, we're going to change it and go this completely other different direction. And how do you adapt to that? How do you adjust to that? So definitely leveraging mock interviews. There are a couple of websites that you can actually go and sign up and people will do them. Usually I just ask somebody, like if I know another engineer, I'll just ask them to do a mock interview for me.
And not for nothing, there's more than enough people in a group. So maybe that's something that can be like, listen, we talk about everything else in that group. So certainly post, if you got an interview and you need somebody to mock, I'm pretty sure somebody will tag on to that. We have time for one more question. And this is sort of, I kind of feel like you'll be able to answer both of these questions and you'll see what I'm saying. So the question is around how to pivot like the personal projects that you create, right, to enhance and, kind of going into your demanding work life. Like, how do you, I guess, manage that? And then sort of the follow-up to that is, it's sort of, I think it sort of ties in how would you prepare for a system design interview, especially when you don't have much experience building large systems. And the reason why I feel like those are tied, because I feel like you could probably launch a personal project and create your case studies and create, right? Like, so can you talk about those two things?
Yeah. So, the personal projects thing is interesting because there's some people that have this idea that like you can't be a good software engineer if you're not spending your entire life writing code, and that is not something I do. Like I enjoy this work, but it's not like a hobby or a passion. Like when I'm done working, I'm done working. Like I'm not gonna go write APIs for fun. That's not
Anthony. Let me find out. You be like, wrap it up, B. You be hitting the wrap it up, B buzzer.
But the flip side to that is like if you're I can do that because I've been working for a while, and so like my resume is kind of flipped, right? Like initially you start out with like these personal projects and like look at my education and the things like certifications and stuff like that. And so like now like my resume, that stuff is at the bottom, and it's like my work experience is at the top because that's more relevant. But when you're starting out, those personal projects are more important because you can't get everything you need from somebody in a 45-minute coding interview. Like
exactly.
that's not showing you everything. Even like if you do a take-home project or something like that, it's not the same. And so having those projects, it allows you to kind of bypass the experience requirements. And it kind of depends on where you are, right? If you're like a student and you're doing that full time, you're in a boot camp or you're in college or something like that, it's a lot easier to do that, because you that's kind of part of learning and studying, right? But if you're already working full time, then if you can try to make it, incorporate it into what you're doing in your day to day, I always tell people try to do that first. Um, Even if you already work as a software engineer and you just want to go into a different area, if you can try to incorporate the things that you want to do into what you're required to do, then you're kind of killing two birds with one stone. Um, but that's not a luxury that everybody has. That's not an opportunity that presents itself. So sometimes you just gotta suck it up and stay up all night like
I was just
that.
gonna say sometimes you just gotta like be head down
Yeah,
and just like make it happen. It just depends on how bad you want that opportunity.
yeah,
So
and I
yeah,
mean, because we're not doing brain surgery. Like this is a skill, and anybody can do it. It takes time. You have to practice and just get better at it. And I think that's a misconception a lot of people have, is that I'm just gonna go to this boot camp for 12 weeks and then I'm gonna go make $200,000 at Google.
it
And
don't
it's
work
like
like that.
it doesn't it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Um, you still have to take the time and put in the work. And so sometimes that means you're staying up late working on stuff. Sometimes you're getting up super early before
Yeah.
everything else you have to do during the day starts. And so it is what it is. Like you have to find that time to practice. So whenever you can, you do it. One thing I will say is that if it's something you're very serious about, definitely make a schedule
Mm.
and stick to it, because it'll keep you focused. But when you make that schedule, also build breaks into the schedule, um, especially like if you have a schedule for interviewing, like studying for interviews, for example. I did this when I was preparing for interviewing at Netflix. I was spending probably anywhere from 3 to 6 hours every day, just
Nice.
like studying and doing practice problems and stuff. And I was driving myself a little crazy. And I got to the point where I was like, I need to stop. I need to take a break. And so I started, I was like, every other weekend, I'm going to take a day and just not do anything. I'm not going to think about any code. I'm not going to think about interview prep, and just kind of clear my mind and step away from it. And that actually helped a lot, because when I came back to it, then it was like, okay, I kind of have like a fresh perspective. I was actually kind of almost enjoying it, if that's the thing.
Yes.
Just because I actually did learn a lot, from studying, because again, you're preparing to demonstrate knowledge and with things that you don't really do on a day-to-day basis. So um, there were some things that I learned, some things that I completely forgotten about since college, because I hadn't really seen them. So, but yeah, just you got
That
to
was
make a schedule and just put in the work. That's
oh,
really what it comes down
and
to, it.
make sure that you have breaks.
And take breaks.
Well, Anthony, this has been so dope. Thank you so much for taking time out of your evening on a
No
Friday
problem
night
at all.
to geek out with us and talk about mentorship, right? And talk about the interview process and just your journey overall. And you dropped some major jewels. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and the Black WPT Facebook group. Thank you so
No
much.
problem at all. And I actually just joined that group like 2 weeks ago.
Nice.
So I haven't really been super active in there, but if anybody has any other questions or anything, feel free to hit me up in there.
All right. So thank you so much for having us, Miss Nichols.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Good night, everybody. See you, Anthony.
Bye.
Bye.